We'll start. May I now invite our chairperson as well as the speakers here. To begin with, Dr. Bimal Patel, Vice Chancellor of Gujarat National Law University, Gandhinagar, who will be chairing the session and of course conducting the session itself. Rear Admiral ASM Abdul Baten from Bangladesh, who is the Vice Chancellor of Bangabandhu, Sheikh Mujibur, Rahman, Maritime University, Bangladesh. Brigadier General Zakaria Mansoor from Maldives, who is the Director General Counter-Terrorism of Maldives. Dr. Bo Sean Win, who is the Deputy Director, Institute of Southeast Asian Studies, Vietnam Academy of Social Sciences, Hanoi, from Vietnam. Please welcome all of them with a round of applause. Welcome back to this post-lunch session, and I think the challenge to all our speakers in the post-lunch session is going to be to how to keep the audience awake, especially after this sumptuous lunch. So I'm not going to waste any time except to say that Dr. Patel is a renowned academician. He is Vice Chancellor of the Gujarat Law University, has been a member of the Law Commission of India, National Security Advisory Board, Financial Sector Regulatory Appointment Search Committee, and he is now Director of Gujarat National Law University since 2008. Our next speakers, I will introduce them as they come along. So over to you, Dr. Patel, to begin the proceedings post-lunch.
Thank you very good afternoon. As it is rightly said that post-lunch sessions are the most difficult to survive. Much as we wish hard not to fall asleep, so my challenge is therefore to keep your attention alive, and therefore I have chosen few real legal issues that will define the future of the law of the sea. We have been discussing since yesterday legal and regulatory issues, but which are these issues in concrete sense? So it is a proud privilege for me to chair the session, and I welcome panelists Rear Admiral Baten, Director General Mr. Mansoor, Dr. Win. As you might be knowing, Dr. Dennis Kamali from Australia was to participate, but because of certain security issues while flying from Australia to India, he had to return. So he has sent apology but also best wishes to this conference. I thank Finns for organizing this conference and enabling me to learn from the discourse. As chair of the session on issues and challenges for governance at sea, which will have presentation on the separation of unlawful activities at sea, law of the sea issues and future trends, maritime border dispute resolution. Among the contemporary big regimes of laws, the law of the sea remains very relevant, as the issues and challenges are continuously evolving, giving rise to variation in state practice. If you look back to the jurisprudence of the International Court of Justice and now the International Tribunal for Law of the Sea, every single year there has been a major dispute involving maritime delimitation or those issues connected with UNCLOS. UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention, has been in force for the last 23 years and remains perhaps the most important instrument in the ocean governance for 167 states and the European Union. But what are the major issues which will bear crucial importance for the future of the law of the sea? Some of them have been talked about, but I would like to delve into this more from legal and regulatory perspective as well. So first of all, I would like to upon the living resources, basically the fisheries and the food security. The European Union, which is the largest consumer of fish and other sea products, has adopted common fishery policies. And EU has been regularly reviewing this policy. It has incorporated the new normative principles, including the ecosystem-based approach and the precautionary principle. However, the European model, which has been based on the traditional approach, has not been successful. And 88% of EU fish stocks have been fished beyond 2009 maximum sustainable yield. And according to one research, the European Community fishery policy remains actually most controversial one. Despite its controversy, few elements of the European Union CFP are adoptable in our region, namely the governance structures, stakeholder involvement in fishery regulation, and right-based fishery management system as a means to allocate individual fishing rights to fishermen, fishing vessels, enterprises, and even cooperatives or fishing communities. Furthermore, as we know, the EU has focused on involving the industry more closely, the responsibilities and rights as well. Now, in the context of Indian Ocean as well, the industry can be given more responsibility through self-management. The result-based management of fisheries could be a right move in this direction. Instead of establishing rules about how to fish, the rules focus on the outcome, and the more detailed implementation decisions could be left to the industry. The result-based, I'm saying this result-based management of the fisheries because they would relieve both the industry and the policy makers of part of the burden of detailed management of technical issues. And I think in the IOR region, this is perhaps the demand of the day. The second issue is the climate change. But I'm looking from the international legal perspective. We all know the land dominates the sea, and that remains one of the fundamental norms and understanding. Coastlines, as we know, now form the key objective circumstance of generation of rights of states to maritime zones, with variable and I would say shrinking coastlines that are being affected by global climate change. However, profound re-examination of international law is required to recast such concepts as legitimacy of existing territorial claims and even basic notions of human rights. Coastal geography, due to its perceived stability, serves as the objective circumstance on the basis of which the rights of states to maritime zones are determined and maritime delimitation disputes resolved. In fact, a defined territory, as many of you must be knowing, is indeed a constituent criterion of statehood under international law. But in the not too distant future, important questions are bound to arise about the sustainability of those aspects of international law, and changes may likely require a profound re-examination of various currently accepted paradigms of international law. Analyzing the contents of the UNCLOS provisions negotiated in 1960s and 70s, that negotiators could have hardly foreseen substantial changes in coastal geography caused by a major natural phenomenon such as sea level rise. With rising sea levels, the baselines from which the breadth of the territorial sea is measured will move landward, affecting the outer limits of various maritime zones. The purpose, as we know, of current rules of international law of the sea is to maintain certainty. The effect of the consequence of the sea level rise will be to introduce uncertainty and increasingly exacerbate it. A possible consequence of projected sea level rise, reversing the hitherto predictable and relatively stable characteristic attributed to coastal geography so as to become a less stable factor and ultimately practically, in my view, meaningless, will be the potential of major destabilization of international and I would say even intra-state relations such as countries like India. The fundamental purpose of law of maritime delimitation is to facilitate expectations of certainty or predictability and of course stability. The consequence of climate change and sea level rise would seriously undermine this very objective of law of maritime delimitation. Changes affecting the basic criteria of statehood, such as territory, population, and government, separately or together, do not adequately affect the existence of a state unless territory and or population disappears. The criteria of territory will no longer be met and the claim to statehood will fail. The very foundations of the current legal system and its current parameters therefore need reevaluation. Certain cornerstone concepts of the law of the sea architecture, like the rules pertaining to baselines and the consequent delimitation and determination of maritime zones, may have to undergo thorough scrutiny and be supplemented by new rules and with new coordinating mechanisms to enable their implementation. And this is a very significant issue. The third important challenge is the underwater cultural heritage. The underwater cultural heritage, a subject though remains in the margins of important forums, but critically important as it has past, present and future importance in the overall governance of the law of the sea. India is yet to sign and then ratify 2001 UNESCO Convention on Underwater Cultural Heritage. Although the reasons may be not completely known, one could expect that maritime jurisdiction and issues of some concepts in and around Indian waters may be one of the important factors for non-membership of the convention. In the absence of ratification, countries like India can develop both administrative and legal arrangements to respond to changing international and national environments concerned with the Underwater Convention. As we all know, India has maritime boundaries with 7 states. It needs to initiate cooperation to prevent future conflicts as far as underwater cultural heritage are concerned. In fact, none of the 7 states having maritime boundaries with India has signed or ratified the convention. And going beyond immediate neighborhood, out of 21 member states of IORA, only 3 states, that is Iran, Madagascar and South Africa, and 2 dialogue partners, that is Egypt, France, have ratified the convention. Although India has not ratified the convention, can it enact a legislation of preventive nature, like what South Korea did, even though it has not ratified the convention? As we all know, India has very rich underwater cultural heritage. However, in the absence of domestic laws and also the lack of ratification, the country has to start preparing itself so as to deal with concepts of warships and other government ships and military aircraft formed underwater, the scope of temporal limits and ownership and jurisdiction of UCH. In my view, such a preventive legislation will supplement missions of the underwater archaeology wing of the Archaeological Survey of India, as well as supplement the existing laws on the ancient monuments and archaeological sites and remains up to 1958, and also Antiquities and Art Treasures Act of 1972. I also like to take this opportunity to advocate that India should take a lead for technical cooperation, at least among maritime neighbors, which can develop standardization of recovery criteria and the specification of procedures and measures to prevent illicit recovery or export of UCH. There is another issue of whether marine archaeology is considered as maritime scientific research during the negotiations. While pure research in under the UNCLOS does not simply direct economic revenue, applied research is primarily focused on future and foreseeable commercial activities. The information gathered by modern underwater technology, when directed at an archaeological target, for example a shipwreck, is likely not to be characterized as pure marine scientific research. This has significant impact as to how we implement the UNCLOS. Activities directed at UCH in the EEZ or on the continent itself may then be subject to the coastal state's discretion, depending on the nature and purpose of that activity. UNCLOS and UNESCO Convention are byproducts of their respective times. UNCLOS was negotiated when underwater technology was not as advanced or relatively available for deep water exploration, and UCH was an exotic subject of interest. The UNESCO Convention arrived when seas and oceans already were spaces where integral policy were to be developed, when technology is unveiling information unimaginable just a few decades ago, and where thanks to evolving scientific methods, underwater remains are indispensable to understanding our common history, not just common heritage of mankind. The fourth is the maritime security threats. I will give a very brief liner on that. The 2008 UN Secretary General report has identified 7 specific maritime security threats. That is piracy, terrorism, illicit trafficking in arms and weapons of mass destruction, narcotic drugs, smuggling and trafficking in persons, IUU fishing, and damage to the marine environment. My analysis of the threats and state practice, mainly focusing on the legislative framework among the IORA countries, have shown that there exists absolutely low level of critical awareness among policymakers about the scope and size of each of the maritime security challenges. The development of legal and judicial framework ranges from a very robust system, such as in Australia, to very weak system in some part of Africa. The IOR states also need to identify and systematically assess the impact of each of these threats on their very level of political and economic development, including the future growth potential. The fifth major challenge is the civil disobedience in the maritime domain. Although we may say that piracy may have receded, there are other threats or challenges, such as how to address aggressive civil disobedience, about appropriate boundaries between two bodies of international law, that is, international human rights norms that reflect the rights of all people to exercise freedom, free expression, and the principles of good order, safety, and security at sea embodied in the international law of the sea. The laws which govern protests on land and protests at sea are different. In last 10 years, the Mox plant case between UK and Ireland, the Arctic Sunrise case, Netherlands and Russia, and the whaling case, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, are all two vivid reminders as to how the NGOs and like-minded institutions could pose, challenge, yet also often certain opportunities to state institutions to reconcile the conflicting interests. Civil disobedience at sea occurs under conditions and geographical areas of shared authority, overlapping jurisdiction, and functional governance divided between flag states and coastal states. If a ship is entering or leaving port, then port authorities may also become an important player. Green activists, as we all know, are driven to direct action to push the envelope of safe and acceptable behavior in order to promote social causes that they deem ineffectively addressed by societal government. Legal environment at sea is far more complex than on land. Rather than having to consider only the competing laws and divergent public policy within a single polity, incidents of maritime protests typically fall within the jurisdiction of several states. Protesters at sea may be from one or more states, and they may not share nationality, either the people they are protesting or law enforcement authorities on scene. The time has arrived, therefore, for countries to start preparing for codes of conduct. For example, the Japanese Code of Conduct, adopted by the Japanese Diet, that condemns dangerous activity at sea, including collisions of ships by non-state activities. The code is the only instrument that explicitly balances the rights of free expression at sea with the imperative of navigational safety. As India has embarked upon ocean economy and in search to emerge as a maritime nation and attain goals of sustainable development, become net security providers, it will face huge amounts of maritime protests of different size, scale, and actors in the years to come. Therefore, it is imperative that India develops code of conduct to prevent, reduce, and control maritime protests. Another issue is the private maritime security companies. The PMC employment has now become, as we know, quite an established norm, but they raise questions on liability for wrongful acts by PMCs on board ships, such as use of force with regard to corporate civil liability for wrongful acts. PMCs have been successful in suppressing piracy in the Western Indian Ocean and are used in the Gulf of Guinea. But they have their fair share of controversy. Flag state, coastal states and port state jurisdictions are all in play against the background of larger and often intensely basic UNCLOS provisions and a set of larger international law concepts. Moreover, even while carrying weapons on board and where the use of force is authorized by international law and guidelines, we can refer IMO, there remains the difficulty in harmonizing human rights standards and penal regimes. For example, can victims of wrongful action seek both criminal and civil penalties from PMCs? Therefore, states should strive to achieve legal harmonization on the use of force by PMCs and armed personnel, as well as the treatment under national law of human rights abuses or violations, namely through the enactment of legislation on liability of PMCs and armed personnel on board. Meaningful cooperation between states, judicial and judiciary bodies on the enforcement of common standards is indispensable to avoiding a permissive for wrongful acts by companies of all kinds without adequate sanctioning and reparation. The rendering of military and security services by PMCs and the presence of armed personnel on board ships shall continue to be the key element of maritime security as a result of their impressive levels of efficiency, taken together with the fact that the overwhelming majority of the world's trade will continue to depend on maritime transportation. Likewise, the profitable and complex business that is criminality at sea makes it highly difficult for states to tackle comprehensively the different root causes. Another major issue is the marine biodiversity. The environmental issues in UNCLOS are, as we all know, not well focused or fully defined, as some are numerous other issues. For example, at UNCLOS negotiations in 70s, genetic technology was only in its very initial phase, and authors did not foresee the importance of possible exploitation of genetic resources on the area. The irony is that genetic resources beyond national jurisdictions, which could possibly soon be exploited and become much more profitable even than the mineral resources, lack specific provisions in UNCLOS, much less in the national legislations. Unfortunately, states are disagreeing, and so as some specialist scholars, over whether such resources may be addressed within the regime of high sea freedoms or whether they might fall under the regime of seabed mining. G77, India and China argue that marine genetic resources should be regarded as common heritage of mankind, much like mineral resources in the area, and they are seeking to get agreement on sharing of benefits. Even successful exploitation of genetic resources should take 15 years from discovery to production. On the other hand, USA, Russia and Japan mainly are resisting marine resources within Part 11, and they are asserting that the freedom of high seas regime for living resources applies to living resources in the area and should preclude a restrictive new regulatory regime. The main priority for developing country is protection of the resources, whereas for developed states to get their priority to the development of marine protected areas and environmental impact assessment. Law of the sea, friends, like almost all other faculty of international law, has remained Eurocentric, or you can say Euro or North American centric. The above issues which are critical are also emanating from the state practice of these two regions, and obviously therefore their state practice and views will prevail over other regions and other states too. Therefore, in the larger interest of the universal norms of the law of the sea, the developing states start playing a very meaningful role. The time has come whereby the notion of common heritage, the traditional framework and technique could adopt to encompass the coastal states' claim exclusive rights over broad areas of the sea and combine these claims with the needs of the international community with those of intensified and more institutionalized cooperation for the exploitation of common resources and the protection of marine environment which characterize the real law of the sea. I have tried to identify only the major critical issues, but if you look deep into the functioning of the UNCLOS and the IMO instruments which cover the oceans, you will find myriad of issues, each competing for earlier solutions. Preventive measures amidst of competitive claims by the 12 major interest groups which put together what we know is the constitution of the ocean, namely the UNCLOS. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Patel. That was a very comprehensive look at the international laws, and some of the issues that you flagged are perhaps worth discussing. Because, as you said, when UNCLOS was authored, many of these issues were not on the table or not even on the horizon. So perhaps there's a need to take a relook at the UNCLOS and maybe look at new laws, perhaps. But moving forward, may I now invite Rear Admiral ASM Abdul Baten from Bangladesh to speak to us. He's a distinguished naval officer with a variety of experience in various appointments, both staff and operational. Worked as contingent commander and military observer in Western Sahara. Has worked in dockyards. He has been director of national security intelligence. But currently he is the Vice Chancellor of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman Maritime University, Bangladesh, and is also pursuing his PhD in inland river passenger vessels safe operation. So, Rear Admiral Abdul Baten.
Good afternoon, distinguished audience. At the very outset, I want to thank the convener or authority for inviting me to this annual conference of SAGAR Discourse 1.0 and for their gracious hospitality. As it has been already expressed that at this time of the day is quite challenging to actually listen to on a subject which matters about law affairs and governance issues. I'll try to adjust because also another challenge is many of the items have been already covered in the previous lectures. So, however, it's an honor for me to be here to learn from this distinguished audience and also from the speakers. To be frank, I'm not a professor or a lawyer. Well, I am still a student and I keep learning things, and also a security practitioner. The initiative taken by SAGAR, the SAGAR Maritime Summit took place last year. I had the opportunity to come here to sign the MOU with the Indian Maritime University as the first Vice Chancellor of the Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman Maritime University in Bangladesh. I like the word SAGAR because it relates to, in Bengali, my mother tongue language is Sagar, also the same sea. And it has very beautiful abbreviation, security and growth for all in the region. I mean region, not in a particular country, maybe a number of countries. But when we talk about sea, I personally say the security and economy for all. Why I call security? Because it guarantees the security of our life. If we consider the ocean as the source of water, and in my mother tongue I say, Pani is Jibon, that water is our life. So that is the all. Security of our life lies with the oceans or sea. And economy. Every conflict, whatever we see around or within the states, between the states, regions, and across the world, there is some point of interest of economy. That's why I think the whole subject is quite interesting. And here the aim of or intention of my talk to this August gathering is to discuss some of the issues, actually, of maritime governance, which I just randomly picked up to make a broad brush imaginary painting having title Challenges of Maritime Governance for Humanity. I come from Bangladesh, and it was actually independent in 16 December 1971. Before that, I think as a citizen of that place, our nation was totally sea blind sort of things. not much of importance given. It was actually opened by the father of the nation, by whose name this university has been also formed, by enacting a law on Maritime Zone and Act in 1974. But again, the country was sort of in hibernation, and the present government under the leadership of the current Prime Minister, she has taken a bold step and opened the first maritime university in Bangladesh. Why I'm telling this is because I consider in our vision, our maritime university has something different than other maritime universities. I'm going to say a few words on what I mean maritime, because generally speaking, when I talk about seas, when I was in my boyhood, I used to hear stories from a grandma or others from the prince looking for the princess across the 7 seas and 13 rivers. So the topic or heading of the students is sea governance. And since I am actually working with academicians and students, at times we have to also discuss on some of the meaningful thoughts of some words and other things. So to me, that's it is still uncertain that how the 7th sea was actually named. It was the literature say that it was in the Greek literature. It was transformed to the English literature. In the medieval period, because the Greek they used to think about their own the Aegean Sea and the seas around them. But during the medieval, the name again changed. And after the Europe discovered America, the name of the seas again changed. Now there are maybe as many as 50 seas and 5 oceans. So when I talk about maritime governance, so I try to give my own way of defining things. Just you may differ. So since my university is maritime, so as a citizen or maritime nation, I think it starts right from the land, because the brains are within the land, and from the coast and in bay, across the seas and deep seas and oceans, even up to Arctic, everything can be covered under the maritime umbrella. It would have been better as Mr. Arthur Charles Clarke, who was actually a fiction writer and British, he passed in 2008. He actually wondered whether it could be also named as ocean. Probably then the talk of our sea blindness would have gone away. I don't want to give much of the statistics which already we know about it. I'll try to cover the second part because the governance is important not only for land, it is important for sea or ocean or maritime areas. So any regime or government's ability to make and enforce rules to deliver services regarding of whether that government is democratic or not. This is actually one person he opined, is Mr. Fukuyama. And the governance of maritime and marine space is the management of stakeholder activities of these areas and spaces. Broadly speaking, the issues of maritime governance are intensely complex, overlapping, and diverse. It involves different stakeholders who may be locals, nationals, or international. So there are certain fundamental elements of governance, like the rule of law, many of us will talk about it, participatory, transparency, consensus-based decision-making, accountability, equitable, inclusive, responsive, and coherent. Coherence is very much important. So things should not just stop after the workshops or seminar. We have to implement it. We have to engage with things. We have to pursue things to happen. I just wanted to draw my own way of framing this conceptual framework for maritime governance. You can see there are parties like national, local, regional, and international. And the challenges are, we have mentioned, the weak framework, then climate change and others, we have talked about it, who are the responsible parties, and then the stakeholders. And there are opportunities, then the problem of maritime governance are interrelated and needed to be considered as a whole, where all nations should coordinate. And maritime governance is multidisciplinary in nature. They should look for balance of economic activity, social equity, environmental equality, sustainability, maritime safety, and security. If we talk about the legal aspect, in every field we talk, like from the social, environmental, economic perspectives, technological and security perspectives, there are, laid down procedures like the UNCLOS already discussed about it, has posed its own, but it has its own limitations. The 1982 UNCLOS forms the basis of the modern legal framework for ocean governance. The vast majority of the world's nations have signed on UNCLOS, which is known as the Constitution of the World for Oceans. The treaty provides guidelines for how nations use the world issues, seas, and their natural resources. UNCLOS has already resolved a number of critical age-old issues, though some states have not become parties so far. The convention has changed political geography of the world. There are still threats to the public order at sea. Firstly, the issue of continued proliferation of excessive maritime claims, mostly resource-based. For example, at the China Sea, there is a well-known case between the Philippines and China. Several unilateral claims show lack of respect for UNCLOS, as they are starting points for other claims on exclusive economic zone and the continental shelf claims. Another problem is claims over unsustainable rocks or reefs in South China Sea or East China Sea that generate their own EEZs and continental shelves. The most controversial aspect of the convention was a regime for deep seabed mining contained in Part 11 and Annex 3. Some of the industrialized states are rightly rejected it. The convention has been ratified by 168 parties though. The next point is maritime security is crucial to national as well as human security. Drug traffickers, gun runners, and terrorists often use the established sea routes of vulnerable illegal migrants of the journey to their destination to circumvent border controls. The block diagram, or you can see that the parties to it are the local, state, and the international organizations. And the most important part is the awareness and the education, and which comes then to training part of it. Then comes the policy and strategy and the actions or operations which we need to do. Out of the several issues for the security aspect, is one of them is the piracy. It's an old issue and its presence could not be stopped over the years. Piracy, total number has decreased maybe recently, but you cannot guarantee that. It's a continuous process. Like most of the statistics say that in the East Africa and Indian Ocean, they were very much prone to piracy and activities. Threat to marine environment, I think the previous speakers that talked about it. Environment is something which we have to give maximum attention. Then the sea level rise, for which we are very much worried about it, most particularly the low-lying countries and island countries. This is a picture given, say, from 1880 to 2017, the amount of sea level rise it has shown. So what should be done for maritime governance? We should adopt a holistic approach to all marine and maritime issues. The integrated maritime policy for maritime spatial planning by the states and the regions. Put in place a robust set of mandatory environmental rules to ensure maritime actors use maritime resources sustainably wherever they operate. Develop level strategy to boost unsustainable and inclusive blue growth, including blue economy considerations in external policies as regards natural resources, energy, trade development, and security. Put in place national and local strategies to address common challenges and opportunities, collaborating closely with distant countries and stakeholders from all relevant sectors. Develop fund for higher education and research for marine and maritime education, improving cooperation and information sharing and making maritime data publicly accessible. Engage in international and cross-sectoral forums to address the common challenges of ensuring safe, secure, clean and productive sea and ocean worldwide. Focus on well-being and safety of human for peaceful existence on planet. This is the humanitarian aspect of it. I think this area is much overlooked. On the opening day, the chief guest, he categorically mentioned, and he actually laid down a big canvas with huge, upper and lower limit, right from the common masses up to those who have all the things. We have to look into their matters. The humanitarian aspect, just for an example, if we take the case of recent eviction or killing of citizens by Myanmar and due to their own purpose, the way they have actually driven them out, almost more than 500,000 people, they have no space to go. They are either going to the water, some of them already, maybe they lost their lives, some actually given shelter by our present government, and these common people say that this great humanitarian job we have done. But you have to consider that if we talk about a region, that how it can actually address the future of this ocean of the region. It could be a security threat, it could be anything. Health security, economic security, all these subjects will be affected by these people. Security of education is also a problem. There has to be clear understanding of the specific areas of interest, natural process and dynamics of marine and coastal system, and decision taken considering future implications and effect. People around the target maritime zone, they must be addressed. And participation by all stakeholders, including local administrative bodies. Use of appropriate instruments, say research, education, technical solution, legal basis, economic supports and agreements. Human capacity at all levels improved through comprehensive maritime education, multidisciplinary training. This is so much important that when I started working for my university, the first department I opened on March, and postgraduate level was maritime law. It was very difficult to really get maritime lawyer. We have many lawyers, but we have so much of maritime issues. Only inland river port, port, the marine port, they have more than 15,000 cases pending, but not a proper maritime lawyer. So we felt urgency, and the mission here is one of them is also looking for opportunities to share ideas and look for the resource persons. Although I have already connectivity with 10 world maritime universities, including many other countries also from this region. So, education and training, they have no alternative. Conflict resolution mechanism and public policy making is another area. We must address these things, and maybe we can have joint workshops and to train our people how to address these issues. Any regime who wants successful governance would have to acquire some guidance like political will to govern or control, rule of law, set standard or principle, in possession of maritime policy for all affairs of the nation at sea, some sort of military command of the sea and regulatory proceedings when requested. So finally, I just would conclude like challenges for maritime or ocean governance are numerous, and each one is important. In order to govern activities at sea, we need to set certain standards. We need to establish rule of law to govern activities by providing broad orders and create obligation and responsibility. This will aim to establish security, stability, order, peace, and minimize injustice. Health of UNCLOS and other legal framework is important, but there are areas of uncertainties and challenges to some particular elements of international law which need to be resolved. Best means to resolve issues over resources and their use are more and more interactions and negotiation. We must develop the skill of the negotiation or the art of negotiation among our future leaders. Arbitration, cooperation between stakeholders, memorandum of understanding, agreements, engagements between security practitioners and services are also important to build confidence. Maritime higher education and research are important to develop skilled human resources as we need for the different professions through well-designed educational policies. Here, regional and international cooperation would be required to share resources and information to boost the activities at sea. With that, I would just want to finish it here. Just a few glimpses of the pictures that how the country can just evict their citizens, and they are just helpless. Many of them probably underwater now. I'm just taking some of the pictures, which I have many. My secretary sent me a lot, but I just want to stop it here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Admiral Baten. In fact, I think you combined your experience as a services officer, a naval officer, and the current role very well to give us what is required to look at marine law and what is the exact position as far as marine law is concerned. So moving on, we have the next speaker, Brigadier General Zakaria Mansoor. He has been the commandant of the Maldivian Coast Guard, but currently he is the Director General of National Counter-Terrorism Center at the Ministry of Defense and National Security of Maldives. Since the morning we will be speaking about different aspects of the ocean economy, the blue economy, the oceans and the commons that we have. But I think we have a practitioner. Perhaps one of the biggest problems and threats that we face in today's world is of terrorism. And here is a man who is entrusted with counter-terrorism duties. So maybe we'll hear from him what are his ideas there. So over to you, Brigadier General Zakaria.
Thank you. Distinguished Chairman, honorable speakers, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon to you all. When I was first invited, the letter was sent from a very close friend of mine. Now, the convener of this SAGAR Discourse, Dr. Patel. He had been to Maldives as a Coast Guard DG, and we had very fond memories as well as a very constructive works done between the Maldives and India. In lines of national security, maritime security, Coast Guard to Coast Guard, exercise dosti, and so on and so forth. So, when I think of the SAGAR, my colleague from Bangladesh has said it is similar. It's ocean or sea, SAGAR means. But I think, when I think of the SAGAR, it comes a very beautiful Hindi song to me. SAGAR Kinare. Dil ye pukare. Or just it goes and goes. So, if you permit to me, I will start with the song so that I can wake up some of you also. But let me not do it. Let's look at the scope, Indian Ocean region domain, maritime threats, Maldives paradigm, and also the regional paradigm. These are some of the issues that I think we cannot simply neglect. The effects is always the very important bedrock of the issues that we live in. So, Indian Ocean region has 20% of global water body. It also has a population of 8 billion, 37 littoral states, 80% of global maritime trade and commerce, and 60% of trade. So, from the east to the west of the Indian Ocean, these are itself are challenges to commerce, to business, to littoral states, a huge population of the world, and a huge mass, water mass. Now, yesterday we heard that, even in fact, my colleague from Admiral has mentioned that, or some other presenters have said that, land is exhausted, land is too much exploited. But yet, when we look at the ocean also, we have some problems. We have conflict zones. We have unreported fishing, illegal fishing, drug trafficking, using ocean and choke points as strategic locations, maritime security related. Main choke points of the world to this region, to the Indian Ocean and Pacific, is here. So, definitely, Indian Ocean security matters are very much important in many ways. Just some of them. Natural disasters, 2004 tsunami, maritime terrorism, needless to mention, it is still a threat, a potential threat. Yesterday we heard about the Mumbai attack, seaborne, used long line of sea, passing through, undetected, yet attacked to a very important part of India, Mumbai. Climate change, over and over again we have discussed about it. In detail, the looming threats, what world would be after 20 years, 10 years. Sea level rise, islands like Maldives, I don't know where to go. Perhaps to India or anywhere else. But these are the real threats that our region is facing. And they are real national security threats to those countries. And the consequences are high. Total loss of people's livelihood, and their economy. Drugs and arms trafficking, IUU fishing in various parts of the. This topic relates to ocean governance. We have so many commissions, Indian Ocean Tuna Commission. We have other regulatory bodies in the region to catch control, fishing control, fishing licensing, and so on and so forth. Who will give the exclusive economic zone to other countries? And many other questions rise in this aspect. Yet these are the challenges in every country's mind that speaks very loudly. For example, Maldives has a very robust economy. 60% to 80% depends on tourism, which is again, it's a maritime tourism. Every island, Maldives resorts are comprised mostly of one island, one resort concept. Each island is a resort itself. There are no local population on all those islands. So, those are the environmental issues that we have. Even in fact, they are security issues. That islands itself has to be secured, guarded, well monitored from threats of incursion, terrorism, and so on and so forth. Drugs and arms trafficking, piracy, we have seen that in the Indian Ocean region many times, coming and going. Yet our countries are able to control before it really becomes a real threat. Human trafficking, human smuggling, and maritime piracy. If you look at one of these topics is the tsunami. During the tsunami, Maldives was destroyed up to 60% of its economy. And was very difficult actually for Maldives of the effect of tsunami. If you look at the total impact of tsunami in Maldives, we lost around 82 people, but yet about 5 to 6 islands was totally inhabitable. Those are the real issues that we went through. And when we talk about terrorism, maritime terrorism, I always want to remind the people about the 1988 armed attack Maldives had from the LGT group. And we are very glad that the terrorist network of LGT had been totally destroyed from our region. As well as there is no a threat of maritime terrorism, at least at the moment in our region. The illegal and unregulated and unreported fishing has been one of the main sources of damage to smaller nations like the Maldives. We are dependent on the fish stock available within our exclusive economic zone. Incidences of resource exploitation by vessels from within and outside the region is of a big concern. Maldives has an abundance of marine resource within its exclusive economic zone, which have been exploited by foreigners for years due to our lack of enforcement capacity. But today, with the assistance of friendly foreign countries such as India, continued surveillance of the Maldivian waters are maintained. This is the one area that we collaborate very much from the very beginning. Every month or every 2 months, Indian government sends either an Indian naval aircraft with surface patrol crafts, naval vessels, jointly patrol our exclusive economic zone and our waters. As a result of growing and existing conflicts and lack of enforcement capabilities, Indian Ocean region also has thriving drugs and illegal arms market. Both may be interconnected to the other, as some parties fund or arms from narco trafficking, while growth of narco terrorism is also a threat in this aspect. Reliable, effective and timely intelligence gathering and information sharing among the state is crucial in curbing these threats. As I mentioned, it was similar with the human trafficking as well. It was yet Maldives has not experienced any form of human trafficking or smuggling at sea. We may not be located at a transit for the crime or may not be heaven for the criminals. But Maldives has set up efficient legal tools to deal with human trafficking through other models, as with other crimes. Regional and global cooperation is an important tool in suppressing this crime jointly. Ladies and gentlemen, the national security strategy of Maldives is considered as a mixture of security thoughts that have been shared. We establish alliances or collaboration between partners relating to a non-offensive, defensive and collaborative security. This can be related to certain rescue systems provided by Indian Naval or Coast Guard assets in the Maldives and HADR assistance provided by the friendly foreign forces during the 2014 water crisis in the Maldives and during the 2004 tsunami. I just want a little bit elaborate on the 2014 water crisis. Malé, the capital of Maldives, is a city that has nearly 100,000 people on about 4 square kilometers. The full size of Malé, the capital, is about 4 square kilometers. And it has more than 100,000 people. Per square feet is the populous city in the world, if you look at the records. The whole water supply system on desalination. But there was a huge problem. The system failed. The system was caught on fire, the engines broke down, the pumps didn't work, and therefore the whole city was without water. Is this an environmental problem or man-made problem? But these are the issues that we are going to face. There is no water anyway. But the regional collaboration assisted in our drinking water as well as for other necessities. But when you look at the impact of it, a city of 100,000+ people without water for a couple of days, it is unthinkable. The city is vertical. It has 10 stories, 15 stories buildings, and there is no way that you can pump any water up. So the elderly, the sick, the children, everybody was suffering. And in that aspect, we received generous assistance from regional countries. India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and the SAC regional countries as well as other extra regional countries. For a small island nation such as the Maldives, the assurance to the security of smaller communities would be through collaborative, collective and strong information and intelligence sharing mechanism. Furthermore, due to a tremendous interdependence among countries in the region as well as far out in the global community, a small nation such as the Maldives, to sustain our aspirations for the development of harmonious society and to elevate the aspirations of economic growth should be encouraged by the supplementation through multiple facets. This is one area that I would like to just highlight. But we have understood very well and we have learned very well through various presentations that the numerous challenges in our region. If we want to have an integrated security mechanism, where we have to collaborate, with whom we should collaborate. Always the collaboration within our society, within our friends, and similarly, our regional cooperation has to be much stronger than the extra-regional cooperation. Neighbors to neighbor. The understanding between our neighboring states and countries, the difficulties the countries face. India and Sri Lanka, Bangladesh and India, India and Maldives, Maldives and Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka and Nepal or Bhutan, whatever country, Maritime or not. But in this aspect, we believe that it has to be well encouraged through the collaboration. The respect for sovereignty and seeking mutual respect. It is also vital for the countries to adopt a diplomatic strategy which would not waive our security arrangements by giving in to any other regional, extra-regional powers. The bodies have been undertaken diplomatically as a nation, respect the sovereignty of other nations, while seeking mutual respect to its own sovereignty. Yesterday we were told that it does not matter whether small or large, it's a sovereign, independent state, that's all. Regardless of the challenges and diversity in the region, peaceful coexistence among the nations have been a prime goal. The resolutions of underlying Indian-Bangladesh maritime boundary dispute is a good example of this, as well as the undertaking of disputed fishing grounds of Indian and Sri Lanka fishermen. Good governance by means of mutually binding multilateral agreements to resolve long-standing disputes and challenges are important in securing the peace of the Indian Ocean. Today, we are so glad that disputes are being resolved through peaceful means. No country went to war. There's no fight. But peacefully, the government of Sri Lanka, the government of India, the government of Bangladesh has peacefully resolved these long-standing issues in maritime security. The other main factor is supplement resilience through collaborative mechanisms. An example may be the trilateral maritime security agreement between Maldives, Sri Lanka, and India. Furthermore, undertakings such as the IONS, DOSTI, which started in 91 when Kaka Sharma was the Coast Guard DG. I'm sure his name cannot be forgotten. He came to Maldives and spoke with us, Maldives Coast Guard, and he convinced us to start a course on bilateral exchange between the Maldives Coast Guard and the Indian Coast Guard. Up to date, the annual the exercise is going on. We also have included the Sri Lankan Coast Guard into this. So now it has become a trilateral initiative. The initiative of IONS, Indian Ocean, National Security, Indian Ocean, which was initiated by then Indian Navy Commander, Admiral, I had the privilege to attend the first ION meeting in Delhi. The next important factor is filling capacity gaps through capacity building projects or measures, such as providing training opportunities or acquisition of enforcement equipment. However, we talk about the law of the sea, UNCLOS, and so on and so forth, about the regulations and rules in ocean governance. I think the capacity of nation itself in countering illegal activities in their maritime zones is vital. They must have their capacity in leading and attending these issues. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, I'd like to emphasize the fact that this region walks on a vulnerable path of security, or an ocean of challenges. Fortunately, we are not in continuous disputes, as we see in like South China Sea. Nor we are perfect. It is imperative to praise the efforts led by India to secure the peace and prosperity of this ocean. It is the efficiency of these efforts which will keep at bay the preying extra-regional powers, as well as build a culturally and historically mutual cooperative security mechanism in the Indian Ocean. Which I have spoken already about those peaceful coexistence between the nations, good governance, mutual respect, understanding between the leadership of the countries. That's all. All the slides are over. And I hope I have made some people woke up. But this is the issues that Indian Ocean region is facing from a security practitioner perspective, not from a perspective of a lawyer or from other perspective. But once again, thank you very much. Thank you for having the patience to listen to my presentation. Chair, thank you very much for having me as a guest speaker. Thank you very much for the SAGAR and FINS organizers. By the way, I'm looking forward to come back again next year. because Goa is, the beach is much more beautiful than Maldives. It's a little bit brownish in color, but it's far too big. Maldives, the islands are very small. You can walk around the island in 15 minutes. Across Mali city center, you can walk in nearly 20 minutes, so it doesn't take too long. But Maldives is a unique country itself. Just let me highlight this. We have 350,000 people of population. From north to south is like 874 kilometers. It's a maritime country. 1 million square kilometers of exclusive economic zone. And we speak the same language. It's called Divedi. It is very similar to all the languages in the region. It's very similar to Hindi, Tamil, Urdu, Pakistan, Bangladeshi language. And I think it's somewhat a mixture of everything. So if you don't hesitate to come to Maldives, because you can still survive the language. And we have this, one religion. We have one religion, Islam is the state religion. Our language is Divedi. The ethnicity is the same. We don't have any different ethnicities. All belong to one race. So I think you all have sent a mixture of people from various countries and states to Maldives to be a little bit peaceful country without those issues. But yet we have problems, believe me. Though we are all Muslims, all belong to Shafi Mazhab, yet they have a lot of issues among themselves, the imams and clerics. This is one of the issues that I'm dealing with right now. After the maritime security problems of my naval background, now I'm dealing with the counter-terrorism and counter-radicalization. And if you see that from this security and growth for all in the region, that is well included, very well included. So, though they are one religion, one language, one ethnicity, still yet the population, the people will find some issues to dispute. Let me conclude here and wish you all very well. And I'm looking forward to see you all again next year, inshallah.
Thank you. Thank you, Brigadier General. I think you concluded on the note of your current interest, and that will give us a bit of an insight. Maybe outside the hall, people will have questions for you on that, much more than they would have here. But let's move on, and for the first time, I think since the morning, we are going to have somebody outside the Indian Ocean region. Dr. Vo Sean Win is from Vietnam, as I mentioned earlier. He is the Deputy Director of Institute of Southeast Asian Studies of the Vietnam Academy of Social Sciences. He has been researching on India's Look East policy, democratization in Myanmar, and politics of Thailand in Myanmar, apart from many other issues like international relations, and has contributed to ASEAN community, maritime cooperation in Southeast Asia, and India's re-engagement in Asia Pacific. So we would be interested to hear from you. What do you think of India's Look East and Act East policy now? And of course, if you can shed some light on the South China Sea dispute. I don't know what you're going to speak about, but you're welcome to speak there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished audiences, it is my great pleasure to be here today in a very beautiful and very beautiful beach. Here, in fact, I have enjoyed a lot, and I have enjoyed a lot from all the speakers from yesterday to today, and I hope that the sessions for tomorrow also inspire me. I am so sorry that I'm not a lawyer, but I have to talk something on the legal background, also from the political and international relations approach. I think that my personal viewpoint will, have some idea. I hope so. It's just idea. Because I have conducted research on India's Look East and Act East policy for more than 10 years now. Especially on the maritime domain between India and Asia Pacific, and now the security, maritime security in Indo-Pacific. So with the SAGAR Discourse this time, so it's inspired me a lot, and I'm trying to chart something about the Indian maritime security ambition, especially in the Asia Pacific, particularly in the South China Sea, Indian interest in the South China Sea. And then about the first, the BJ ruling is very important in terms of practical of freedom of navigation and overflight in the exclusive economic zone, continental shelf, or that is a high sea, international sea. And it's outline of my presentation. Is first I have some summarize on India's maritime security from 2004 to 2015, and then I will examine some issues related to the India's interests in the South China Sea, and about the significance of the BC rulings on the Philippines-China case. Also very important. I also suggest here, and after that I have some option. I think that I'm a Vietnamese and a perspective from Vietnamese people who conduct research on India for more than 10 years, and also some useful for the forum today. And about the India's maritime security, you can see that 2004 with the maritime doctrine in charted a very important landmark from my personal viewpoint with Indian maritime ambition. From that, that you want to have a very comprehensive understanding among about the background concept among the many circles in India, especially who is in charge of the maritime domain. That was very significant for India at the time. And then after that, in 2007, you have the maritime military strategy that also realized the doctrine in 2004. And with the name freedom to use the seas in the maritime strategy, a military strategy, and you also have ambition to write a comprehensive understanding of strategic thought process. And a very important move is 2009 to have another doctrine. That was very important. And very recently you have the 2015 maritime security strategy. That I think that is also good for India because you are now preparing for something in the future of India, not about the present, but also the future in India. And important is that for maritime security strategy, you have some change in quality. That is from 2007. You mentioned about the freedom to use the sea. That is rational for the Navy to plan the acquisitions and deployment of naval assets in the maritime environment only. But when you come to 2015 with another maritime security, so now you say that is in order to provide freedom to use the sea in 2007 military strategy. Now you have a strategy of inner resurgence in the 21st century, underline the necessity to ensure that the seas remain secure. That means that you're moving something to prepare for the future. And from my personal viewpoint, it seems that India now is ready to be a global player in maritime domain. That is from my mind. Yes. And here's also the scope. Scope also reflects a lot the Indian ambition in terms of maritime domain. We took an foreign so you focus mostly on primary area in Indian Ocean only. But from 2007, you move it, expand it to many other regions, including the South China Sea and West Pacific. And recently, with 2009 to 2015, doctrine and maritime strategy. Now you have primary and secondary areas. Secondary areas, I think that includes a lot of areas surrounding in the ocean, but also extend to South and East China Sea and West Pacific Ocean. That also reflects very clearly the Indian maritime ambition. And now we move to the South China Sea, a very important area in the strategy. It is looked at its policy. Why the South China Sea is important? You can see from here that there is string of birds built by China. And I think that all of you here understand very clearly what the string of birds mean. And also, you know that trade is also important to India's economic growth. As I learned that recently trade accounts for around 40% of India's economic growth. And the economies in the Asia Pacific contribute more than 30% of Indian total trade. So in the east of India is very important for Indian economy. And you know that around more than 90% of Indian trade is seaborne trade, and more than half of that is work. So it's also mostly through Strait of Malacca, to the South China Sea and to some other anywhere else. So it's very important for India. And also, you know that oil and gas exploration is so very important to India's economy. And you have a lot of blocks in the South China Sea, in the exclusive economic zones offered by Vietnam. In Vietnam's exclusive economic zone. and you need the security for your project in the South China Sea also. And you know that in the diaspora also count, I think that millions in Southeast Asian country. So you have a protect in some means with the community and Indian community there in Southeast Asia. So it means that the South China Sea is very important to India. But about the challenge is that you know that the dispute in the South China Sea with the 9 dash line charted by China also give a threat of freedom of navigation and overflight in the South China Sea. And there are also, you know, threat of terrorism, especially in the inverse of the IS, with the, you know, that a lot of train in the Middle East, now turning to Indonesia, the Philippines, and Malaysia. And also now we learned very clearly about the situation in the Mindanao, in the Philippines. And piracy and armed robbery, also very critical aspects in the South China Sea domain, which you have a lot of ships passing through South China Sea daily. So job presence there in the South China Sea is very important to the security and stability in the region. And you also face with a lot of other traditional security issues, human trafficking and something else. So that is also a challenge there in the South China Sea. And now about coming to the ruling on the Philippine and China case, and what does this mean for us, for international community in general, and to India in particular. You know that the China claims in the South China Sea based on its rights in the scope of the 9 dash line, and it stated that the rights are protected under the international law, including the UNCLOS. And in the request of the Philippines sent to the Arbitral Tribunal, it about that at least consider the legitimacy of the China rights in regard to maritime area, the rights of the Philippines in terms of exclusive control, continental self. And the Philippines also requests the tribunal to declare that the China's maritime claim in the South China Sea based on its so-called 9 dash line, but they see to UNCLOS, and so it is invalid and something else. And here's about the ruling of the PCA. That another point, but here I just chart out only some significant points from its meaning to the freedom of navigation, of the oil and gas explorations, of the some other bilateral cooperation among India and some countries in the South China Sea. That is, the convention does not include any express provision preserving or protecting territorial rights that China views as a basic to claims in the South China. The South China claim are contributed to UNCLOS, and it is invalid. And the second is, PCA states that China has never especially clarified the nature of scope of its claimed right, nor it has ever clarified its understanding of the meaning of the 9 dash line. It means that China is unclear map in the South China Sea. And also the related to the state of the features in the South China Sea, mostly inspectly that conclude by PCA that they are high tide features or low tide elevations only. And PCA also concludes very clearly that none of the high tide features in this family is capable of sustaining human habitations or an economic life. So it, for their own, like the effect of the article 121, these are suspicious shall have no exclusive economic zones or continental self. And another point is very important that the low tide elevation belong to the high tide feature if they locate within 12 miles of the high tide feature. So it belongs to the high tide features. And here, in other words, that's because of the state of the feature is to be evaluated on the basis of natural conditions. So if you look at the artificial islands built by China in some features indiscreetly invaded by China, so artificial islands built by China indiscreetly are not considered to be islands, as stated in the Article 121 of UN Plus. That is very clearly. And what about its meaning? Whether the BCA consider and conclude that the 9-dash line map has no legal basis. So are the submission by countries like Vietnam and Malaysia, especially joint submission between Vietnam and Malaysia and Vietnam, very important because it relates to the exercise of freedom of navigation and overflight in the South China Sea, that in the high sea or includes the economic zone in the South China Sea. So because we have to apply the some articles of UN clause, like Article 38 or Article 87, related to exercise of freedom of navigation. And which part is the exclusive economic zone? That is quite clearly. If we can see from the joint submission of some countries, including Vietnam and Malaysia, jointly submit to UN 2009. And we also from that we also see that the legitimacy of oil and gas exploration project offered by Vietnam in exclusive economic zone of Vietnam is legal or not. And according to the ruling of the BCA, I think that we have to recognize this because it's important, because at least we are a member of the UNCLOS. So we should be protected by UNCLOS. That is the thing. And here is some point that we should see, that related to freedom of navigation that I brought up, incident 2011. It is so that at that time the Indian ship just moved only 45 miles from the coast of Vietnam only, but you hear from the warning from Chinese. That is the problem of something, a violation the freedom of navigation in the South China Sea. And recently, you know that why the China claim is illegal. In practice, you see, a lot of companies now they have exploration of oil and gas projects in exclusive economic zone of Vietnam, and like companies coming from the South Korea, the US, UK, Russia, France, Japan, Norway, Australia, and India also. So that is, they don't recognize that line claimed by China, because they understand very clearly that that is exclusive economic zone of Vietnam, and those countries now are available there, and they are now conducting the exploration there in the exclusive economic zone of Vietnam. And what's the problem after the BCA? That the problem is that China rejected the ruling. That's the problem. That China does not recognize the ruling. That's the problem. Problem because if someone does not follow the rule, so it can break the rule. So that is the problem. So what we can do, especially what India can do, and from my personal viewpoint, there are some years conducting research on India, and I have some thing. I think that also, from my personal viewpoint, that's also good to consider. The first is it should conduct friendship to ports in Asia Pacific as a way of freedom of navigation. That is must be, because you are practicing the freedom of navigation. The second is, as I mentioned before, that there are a lot of challenges, like terrorism, piracy, and also you have to protect the oil and gas exploration project in the exclusive economic zone of Vietnam. So warship patrol in the high sea, in the international sea, in the South China Sea, you can conduct that. That is the second point. The third point is you should continue conduct bilateral joint exercise for mutual interests, like you have done with Vietnam, with Japan, with US also. And you know that in the framework of the East Asia Summit, India is a member with ASEAN country, with China, Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, Australia, the US, and Russia. In that framework, you also have some mechanisms, some agenda, like they have statement on the rapid disaster response, very sensitive. And in that framework, some other ideas can be realized by India in terms of Genome. And you also see that recently we heard about the joint exercise between India with the US, India, US, Japan, and you also have some other dialogue with Russia between India, US, Australia, and Japan, and you also have trilateral between India, Japan, and Australia. So you should continue with that because that's very important for the security at sea. And another idea from my personal point of view, I also followed the Milan from India. I did from 1995. Now you have a lot of, a lot of more countries join, especially a lot of countries from Asia Pacific joined Milan. And like Malabar because you just from the beginning inland of India and you move to the sea from the west of Indian Ocean now. Decided to move to the east, and decided to move to the Asia Pacific also, and why Milan also? So that Milan is something not related too much on military, although it's military, but it's something very fresh. It's changed. So Milan is not in Indian Ocean, and now it could move to Asia Pacific. That is my last idea. And everything I speak today is that with the engagement of a lot of countries into the region, in the ocean, in the Pacific, especially in the South China Sea, it's not to contain any specific country. The thing is that we have comprehensive and joint efforts to have to protect good order at sea. That is my idea. Thank you so much for the kind attention.
Thank you, Dr. Woshon Win. I think some of us who, at least somebody like me who watches maritime security and security aspects, would be more interested in speaking to you outside the conference because of your provocative views. And we have friends from China, so I would love to hear their views of what they think of your presentation about the South China Sea. It is something that people normally don't speak very openly about. So thank you for being very candid about the views that you gave. So now we have about 12 to 15 minutes for question and answers. And we already have one question to Brigadier General Zakaria Mansoor to begin with, from Sanskruti Ajib. If you can identify yourself, who asked this question. There you are, the lady there sitting right. Iyer, okay, so I can see it as AJIR, so that's what, it's Iyer, Sanskruti Iyer. And what are you, if I can get to know? Student of political science from Goa University. She asked this question to you specifically. Does China pose a threat for island countries like Maldives and Iowa?
No.
In one word.
No. You need any elaboration?
You want any elaboration? He wants it. You want an elaboration? From security and sovereignty perspective, she says. So I think you need to.
Sir, it is not only related to Maldives, it is specifically related to Maldives, but in relation to all the island countries in the Indian Ocean region.
You may want to elaborate.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think no country is a threat for another country. The most important thing that we have discussed here is collaboration. More collaboration on within the regional countries, and collaboration within the extra-regional countries. In that respect, Mauritius is a very peaceful country. We have collaboration with all the countries in the region, including our SAARC countries as well as non-SAARC countries. China is in all the regions in the countries. So China is representing also in India, in Sri Lanka. A lot of infrastructure has been developed in a lot of countries in the region by China. One of our bridges from mainland, from the capital city to the airport island. I think any colleague who have been to Maldives would understand how difficult it was by boats. So, from the security perspective, no country is a threat for. Specifically, I can speak about Maldives. No, there is no any country which is threatening to our sovereignty or our independence.
Great, thank you. There are two more questions. One is for Dr. Bimal Patel from Lieutenant VM Patel, who is the Vice President of FINS. He says, he asks, how do we get international laws enacted to prevent or preempt construction, creation of artificial islands in Indian Ocean in other oceans?
Under the UNCLOS, there is a specific regime. So artificial installations, structures, and islands are very much allowed in the EEZ. So there is no control over there. However, what happens is if a country using the reefs and rocks and certain sea-type features try to build the islands and later on they want to claim as for islands, and also would like to base a theory of human habitation, which is a big challenge to the process, which we have really seen in the PCA ruling, which is completely acceptable. Having said this, artificial installations and structures and islands are also need to be protected. For example, in India, we have certain installations in the Bombay High Sea, for example, and the UNCLOS provides for 500-meter rigs. Now, back in 1970s, when India apprehended certain fears or security threats to its rigs, what it did, it expanded as a preventive measure. Country like United Kingdom objected it, but India very well said that it is a temporary measure which we need to impose upon, and UK had to withdraw. So when a country finds that there will be certain threats to its artificial installations and structures in the EEZ, though UNCLOS do not say in so many words, but the state practice allows the countries to prevent and take even preventive measures from the security threats. And as I said, the state practices are really emerging in a big way. Not only with regard to these artificial installations, but even now, for example, if you look at the Australian Maritime Act of 2015, this morning we are talking about marine pollution happening in the high seas. Now, as you all know, there is no boundary in the seas. So Australia has tried to extend its jurisdiction right up into the high seas. It speaks of the preemptive measures. So we are not talking reduction and control measures, but preemptive measures. And actually, the Australian Act of 2015 is very much under criticism by the international community, including among others the West European nations and America. But for Australia, looking at the maritime security threats, especially the refugees, the narcotics, and the WMD and environment, they said, fine, we would like to make sure that those threats do not actually come closer to our shores. So I think the time has come where I personally believe and advocate that countries like India also should take much more preemptive measures before these threats infest the economic interest of the countries.
And maybe the neighborhood, the coastal areas, EEZ, India's EEZ is what you are suggesting.
Yeah.
Do you want to add something on what was asked? Is there anything in UNCLOS that prevents artificial building of artificial islands? Since you spoke about South China Sea, maybe you have a view on that.
Especially related to the artificial islands built by some countries in some features. That is, low tide elevation or high tide futures, that that when you consider the status of any futures, that means from the natural origin. It's not what you see at present. You build something on top of it. That it must be from natural origin. That's my point.
That's right. I have one question here, and unless there are any other questions, this is from Uma Sudhindra again, and this is addressed to the entire panel. Coming from varied backgrounds, what does this panel prioritize as top 3 action points for maritime governance for Indian Ocean rim countries? So maybe one line each, if all of you. What are the 3 top priorities in your view? Maybe Admiral Baten will have some point, and then we'll come this way, one after the other. I think it's on this.
I think the first point is to have actual knowledge on the subject. As one of the reports from NASA revealed that 95% of the ocean, if you could consider that as a gargantuan reservoir of resources, is still unknown. So we have to have the exact knowledge and deal with those things. And if we do not know a territory properly, if we only visit the seas or near shore areas once in a lifetime, also with a partner and looking to each other, not actually looking at the sea, then this sea blindness would continue. So my idea is that we should have to engage with in the real term. And by region, we have to engage with one another. And as I will point out the idea thrown by the Honorable Chief Guest yesterday, that we have to look into the matters of the humanity, right from the masses up to the top. We have to minimize the gap between the rich and poor, and that is very important. Equitable distribution of resources. If we really want to, generate peace in this part of the world. I know in Europe they fought several wars between themselves, but they have now a borderless territory almost. I just got into a train, ICE, almost 15 years ago. And I went through, and nobody asked me. And again, I came back to Frankfurt after crossing those areas. We have to address situations like this.
So you're looking at more knowledge, perhaps.
Yes, knowledge. Thank you.
Knowledge is the first priority.
Yeah, because there are many unknown territories. Thank you very much. And those who really mean business, right from the politicians and the professionals.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Patel, one priority.
Additional implementing legislations in conformity with UNCLOS is number priority 1, because that will bring legal certainty, predictability and stability in the way the Indian Ocean countries are governing the ocean.
The uniformity will come in the laws, you mean?
Not necessarily uniformity, I would say more harmonization.
More harmonization, great.
In my opinion, the most important is the national capacity. National capacity building, understand their own gaps and filling it with good governance.
Right. What do you think, Dr. Wayne? I know you're not in the Indian Ocean, your country is not in the Indian Ocean, but still, as an outsider, what do you think should be the priority, topmost priority, one priority for Indian Ocean region? Or the nations here?
Thank you. Actually, I share the ideas that the gentleman sitting next to me.
Yes, from Maldives. Yeah.
It should be.
Yeah. Okay. So he agrees to what Brigadier General Zakaria Mansoor says. So I think on that note, we'll have to. Is there any other questions? Yes. Okay. Oh, our friends from China. That will be interesting. Please introduce yourself, sir, and then.
Thank you, Mr. Nitin. My name is Leah. A political counselor from the Embassy of China in New Delhi. Since Mr. Nitin mentioned here is a Chinese friends, so I have to respond. And since Mr. Wing mentioned the PCA, so I made some clarification. Actually, one point is the South China Sea actually, since ancient times, Chinese, we have some activities in this area, and in history, we already have some jurisdiction on this area. So we have our claim, and some countries have their claims. That is very normal. As far as the China and the Philippines case, and actually between our two countries, in our bilateral agreements, we have already agreed to resolve this issue through bilateral channel. So I think it is a very normal situation for the other disputes, no matter in land dispute or maritime dispute. Second point is, since the previous Philippine government, they takes unilateral action, they do not abide by the bilateral agreement said they file unilateral action to the tribunal to file a case against China. And China is one of the members of the UNCLOS, so we respect UNCLOS, the treaty. So actually it is also our legitimate right to take the position to not participate in the PCA ruling. It's also our right because some countries, you may know, like the United States and the other countries, they also have some similar cases. So it's also our right to not participate in this PCA ruling. The third point is after the ruling, and we have already made our position very clear, since the ruling is endorsed by some permanent members, but they cannot represent the international community. So we said we do not recognize this PCA ruling, and we advocated some concerned countries to resolve this issue through bilateral channel. So after the new president of Philippines and the two countries have already agreed to check a bilateral channel to resolve this issue. So in this May, the two countries, China and the Philippines, has already taken the first round of the maritime boundary talks. So it right now is on the right track. And so far as the China and Vietnam, also we have the consensus, and we should resolve the sea maritime boundary dispute through negotiation and in a peaceful way. So I think right now, especially in August, China and ASEAN foreign ministers meeting, we endorsed a COC framework. So I think in the future, it's not necessary to worry about the situation of South China Sea issue. So we are confident that the peace and the stability is in our common interest for China and ASEAN countries, also in the interest of India. Thank you very much.
I recognize that based on the historic rights, and I mentioned very clearly in my presentation that there is no historic rights in UNCLOS. So that is the first point I want to share. The second point you mentioned about that we have agreed to settle.
And you also ask the PCA to recognize that based on the historic rights, and I mentioned very clearly in my presentation that there is no historic rights in UNCLOS. So that is the first point I want to share. The second point you mentioned about that we have agreed to settle in bilateral normal or in consensus. So that we just have the in the Gulf of Baten between China and Vietnam only. And in the South China Sea, that from my personal viewpoint, that international approach or multilateral approach is now approaching, because that is interest not only between China and Vietnam, but also the Malaysia, Brunei Darussalam, and some the Philippines and some other country else. Especially Indonesia, that is Natuna Island also has something to regard in terms of its exclusive economic zone also. That is the second point. The third point about the PCA, I think that we are the member Vietnam and China. All we are the member of UNCLOS. And PCA was established under the Annex 7 of UNCLOS. And in its ruling, PCA also clarified that we have a responsibility to obey. That is because we are member of that, so we belong to that. That is the third point. And the fourth point, I hope that the sales framework between China and ASEAN will have more bright points for the future.